Hello and welcome to the Face Downs, your source for TCG news and all things Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Lucas.
I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are joined by a very special guest, a frequenter of the Face Downs and a avid testing partner of Lucas and ours. Welcome to the stage, Dino.
Happy to be here.
Hello, hello. Welcome back. We've got so much stuff to talk about. This was a very busy weekend for all of us, for different reasons. And so we're here to kind of do like a report of kind of how our events went.
Yeah, the ongoing segment. Did Face Downs take the W?
And the answer is, you'll find out.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
But it was not me.
And it was not me.
Resident of the bubble, me and Dino. But celebrating. Joe, take it away.
Yeah, so I went down to Sushi Night Gaming in Lower Hutt this weekend to play the first regional of the season. And I took out first place after Swiss with 10 Yi Sword Soul going 5-0. Yeah.
Let's go.
Amazing. So congratulations. It was super fun getting your updates throughout the day. I think it was like, we were, I think, maybe 2 rounds into the other event that we're about to talk about. And it was just Joe was going, so I'm 2-0. And then 30, 40 minutes later, he goes 3-0. And he goes 4-0. And we're like, okay, a lot of O's still coming in. And
yeah, it was good.
So you ended up first after Swiss. So what did you take down? So you said 10 Year Sword Soul. What was the choice? What was the reasoning behind it?
So it's a deck that I had been testing out a little bit before the event. It's one that I played a fair bit, just casually at Hobby League and stuff. I was gonna throw some spice in there, but just because of my lack of testing and lack of playing, I don't think I was ready to test these cards. I really wanted to try out the Dragon Cycle card, Heavenly Dragon Circle. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Circle.
Yeah. And I also wanted to test out the Small World build and a few other things, but in the end, I just went with a really kind of standard build, I suppose. So I ran all of the 10 years, not a maximum, sorry. It was 2 of the Adhara and Vishuddha, and then 3 of the Ashuna. And then, I might as well just go through the deck list really quickly.
Yeah, so we'll have it posted up as well so that people can watch along and kind of look through as well. But yeah, do you want to break down kind of your particular tech choices or any reasonings as to why you did or didn't main particular cards?
Yeah, so I chose not to main Veiler just because I feel like it's, I don't know, not great. And I was expecting a few people to still be maining the talents, and I just preferred Imperm over it as a card. I still mained Ash Blossom because I feel like while people are chain blocking around Ash Blossom for their kind of main plays, there's so many cards in the format right now, like your Prosperities, your Desires, Search cards, Vessel, that you want to hit with Ash Blossom still. So I still think it has its place in the format, and you just want to hit the right cards with it, I suppose. I went with a main deck Protoss, just because that can just steal wins out of nowhere. Main reason for that. I suppose the only tech choice I kind of had of the day was the triple Cosmic Cyclone in the main.
And what was your reasoning behind that? Because obviously that's not a common include. I think, we saw off the back of some of these recent events, we saw maybe main deck 1 for inevitability, but why 3?
So I was told a few days from the event that there was quite a few kind of trap decks that were going to be at the event. Eldritch was one that I was kind of a bit worried about. If I lose the dice roll, I wasn't super confident in the main deck having no spell trap removal. And then also I just wanted spot removal for Mystic Mine, because I've seen that just appear in lots of main decks recently. And I mean, if you look at some of the ones in the top 8, I believe there's about 4 or 5 decks that made top 8 that were main in Mystic Mine. So also a chainable thing to out an IO. I know that's not a massive thing to main a card for, but yeah, I guess the main reason I went with it at 3 in the main as well is observing matches recently. I've noticed a lot of the decks tend to just end with 1 set back row. So it could kind of just spot removes the one back row, the one problem, and if worst comes to worst, they negate that to keep the back row alive, and I baited a negate out. So I liked it because it wasn't costing any cards to activate.
I think modern players really undervalue MST as a card. Older players know that card was limited for so long because it was just so free, right? You trade effectively a card in hand for your opponent's best card on field a lot of the time. And I think nowadays we look at it and go, well, it doesn't negate every monster on their field and blow up their entire back row, and it doesn't punch them in the face. Like it's not worth playing, right? Because it doesn't do enough.
Yeah,
I think that's completely untrue. In the main deck, I've always loved Cosmic and Twin because you're right. Most decks end on like 1 or 2 back row, and if that back row is even just droplet imperm, hitting one of those is kind of massive sometimes.
Yeah, and you think of, particular back row, like Dreaming Town can only activate during the main phase. If Prank Kids showed up, our favorite tier 2 deck, Pandemonium can only activate during the main phase. There, a lot of relevant spell traps are restricted to that.
Well, like Blackout's a big one, because Blackout obviously is Icarus attack. Insanely strong, but sucks if your opponent just MSTs it. You're like, well, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other time it came up is against like pure Tri Brigade. You can like just hit the revolt, and that just forces them to like revolt, and they don't really get as much value out of the revolt, I suppose.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you tactics them, and they cry.
Yeah. And so then what was the side deck decisions? Obviously, the choices for side deck, like we've discussed previously, it's a really diverse format. Like it's really hard to pick which hand traps hit the most effectively across all the matchups. So you kind of have to look at a holistic approach. So why don't you go ahead and break down kind of your side deck decisions and the reasonings for including, and things you might have wanted to include or not.
I've always been a big fan of, I know I've spoken before, I think, about it, like side in like free ofs, because I want to see them. So I went with triple Lancia, triple Nibiru, triple Droll, triple Dark Roller No More, and triple Judgment. So it's a pretty straightforward side deck. The reasoning for Judgment is, I think we talked about it in testing. Like it kind of just stops the problem. It doesn't it doesn't give them a chance to like do anything to it. I suppose. Like I was thinking anti-spell, but I think we worked out that anti-spell was slightly weaker in a way. The Lanciers were in there purely for like, I guess the Eldritch deck and other things, and like lots in the format. I mean, even Dragon Link, it was huge for me. Nibiru was probably my worst card of the day. I didn't even bother siding it in most of the time because like my matchups just didn't. The Nibiru just didn't do enough, and like I think we've seen like in bird up matches and like even 10-year Sword Soul, like you just give them a token, they can still at least like sometimes carry on their plays. It's good at the right times, but like I don't know. I guess I hadn't done enough testing to like work out the proper choke points to Nibiru people. So
yeah, I'd maybe toss it to Dino like. About Nibiru specifically, feels a bit like a main deck card right now. I don't know about it in the side.
Yeah, it's tough. What do you think, Dino?
I think it's quite a good main deck card right now because people don't respect it game one. But also in a deck, specifically Sword Soul, that I've also been testing and playing quite a bit, I really dislike the card because if you resolve it, it turns off all of your 10-year names. And you cannot start with them, which is what you want to do when you're going second usually.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it is such a tough one, I find. But and you just said it didn't really show up for you. So would you want it to swap it out for anything else?
Yeah, I'm not sure what. I did think about a red reboot and Imperial Order, but like I don't like siding these one-off cards because it's just so random, like to draw them. Like people were asking me why I didn't main deck IO as well. I kind of jokingly said I wanted to earn my wins, but like I think it was just because I mainboarded a few more spells and I just never wanted to get locked under my own IO, and I prefer cards
I think IO is really average right now, which is silly to say because we were clamoring for it to be banned, and I still think it deserves it.
Oh yeah,
but it feels less good in a format where most main decks are playing trap cards and some monster effects that just natively deal with back row, whereas compared to when Tri Brigade and stuff were at full power, a lot of their back row removal was accessed via spell cards, like
some of those broken cards were
like
the
Tanky
spells.
Barrage, or they were just playing 3 Desires in every deck. I think it felt a little bit stronger.
Yeah, my probably MVP cards of the day was Vessel and Judgment. I would say like Vessel was just insane because like for some reason or another, lots of people don't ash it for some reason. I don't know why they didn't, but like I would activate and they would like not hand trap it or not negate it, and I'll be like, okay, you're just giving me like 2 cards to play with now. And it was insane. Like one of the games was against Dragon Link, and I put him under in turn 1. I set up a Chaofeng Protoss, and he was just like, "Oh, okay,
cool. That's,
no lights, no darks.
No lights, no darks. Lovely."
And then
cool.
Judgment came out really clutch in my match against Bird Up, So I
Mhm.
set up a board of like the standard Zhizhao and Baron, and then I had 2 Judgment face down and a cool buy. Like it was pretty nutty.
Okay, I like that. And then in terms of Droll and Dark Ruler, did you find that Droll was quite impactful throughout the tournament? Because obviously I feel like a lot of decks currently, there's a lot of searching going on, a lot of adding cards. Do you feel like it's still, the include that it was last format?
I think that like it's really, really good against certain decks. And it's kind of like you need to know the timings against other decks, I suppose, is the thing with Droll. It worked well for me against the Luralisk player because I did it on his Wagtail when he searched the Burkle, and it kind of like stopped his play because he just didn't have enough follow up in hand. But the best deck it was good against was against the Dragon Link player, and I opened Lancia Droll against him in game 3, and that felt good.
Yeah, I feel like Dragon Link has evolved to a point where Droll now hits it. I feel like gone are the days of Droll being a card that functionally did nothing against that deck. Like there was so much grabbing from deck, there was so much summoning from grave. Like there was no point in putting in a Droll. But you think of so many of the extenders that they're required to run now, Seyfert, Chaos Space. Like these are just hit down by Droll, and even like the Chaos Rulers, like they actually just can't add a card. Sure, they're mill 5, but that's nothing.
Every time I play against Dragon Link, I know every card in their hand because they search everything. It's kind of one of the weaknesses.
The one change I would make was just taking the Bureau out the side and maybe put in something like Triple Chalice or something along those lines in there.
Okay, something a bit more go first.
Yeah, just something that would like
go second.
Help me get around like just problems. Like I know it's probably me just being like salty because in my top 8 match, because we played a top cut for prizing, I came up against Shadow Invoked, and they just made Kaliga Winder, and I didn't have anything game 1, and then game 2 I won, game 3 he made Kaliga Winder again, and I drew 5 monsters again, and I sided in like everything. It was just one of those things where you just don't see a side, and you're like, oh,
if one of those monsters could have been a Chalice, you would have been fine.
Yeah, exactly. If one of those was like a Chalice, or if it was like just something that could have dealt with it, like another Imperm or something, I would have been able to play, and it was. Yeah.
Kaliga's not a huge problem for you.
Kaliga's not.
You can just use one effect, make a big guy, and then swing over it. But Winder is a pain in the ass because you can't make anything.
Yeah.
All right, that was successful though. I mean, you must feel pretty good about first after Swiss 5-0. Congrats on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you
said owner of a proud, the gorgeous Fluanderese regional match.
Well, I remember you messaged us saying like, "This is it. This is the come up. I'm back," and you proved it. I guess you had the right attitude.
It felt really good, like because I hadn't played an event since June. I think the last event I played was the multi-format and like Sands event down in Dunedin. Like,
wouldn't it have been the Yu-Gi-Oh day?
Oh,
was that earlier?
Yeah,
I mean, that was earlier.
Our one, I think that was earlier, and then our one only had like 5 players at the time. So like, I'm talking like a bigger event, like
of course.
Like and obviously running all these events, I just get to observe Yu-Gi-Oh, and it was really cool to like finally dig in and play, I suppose. And
you finally showed up with a $1,200 deck and smoked everybody.
Yeah, it felt good.
To be fair, half the field was on this deck. Like it looked like Tenyi Sword Soul was just the move. That'll bird up.
There was a lot of meta, and I think all 5 of my rounds were like against decent decks. So like it felt, it was a really good day, and I have to shout out Sushi Night Gaming and Steve and his team there because they just put on like an amazing event.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of amazing events, me and Dino also took part over the weekend in the Pranky Boys, the inaugural Connor and William Giles' hosted international free winner case extravagant event. It was quite
competition
intense.
Contest. Yeah.
Ruben was the head judge. I was competing alongside our guest Dino. There was I think 146 players in the end, and unfortunately ended up 18th after Swiss, and Dino running up at 17th. So we just missed out on top 16. But Dino, do you want to talk about what you played, how it went, talk about your list?
So I played Sword Soul Tenyi. Haven't heard about that deck before.
Well,
my list is
crazy.
The
Tell
list
us
is
everything.
quite different to Joe's list, however.
Okay. So what are your notable points of difference? Because obviously, I think the biggest differentiator is that we were in a position, Joe's in a position where, it was 5 rounds because the numbers were known. We were anticipating a lot larger event numbers, and so we were understanding that this was going to be a 7, 8 round kind of a tournament.
Including top cut, it would be 12 rounds.
Yeah.
So to win, you have to get really consistent decks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the goal was to have a consistent deck that could just deal with a bunch of random different meta decks, because the overseas meta is a little different. I've been seeing a lot more of the invoked DPE decks, as well as just a little more Eldritch and a lot of Sword Soul and a lot of Bird Up. Personally, I didn't respect Swords the Mirror enough, and that's what ended up being my downfall in the final round. But all the other decks, I feel like I tailored my deck to beat them as much as possible. So notable includes in my deck, I had 3 copies of Heavenly Dragon Circle rather than Cycle, and I was only on 1 Cycle. And that card was by far the best card in the deck. Every time I drew it, nobody played around it. It always resulted in at least a 1-for-2, sometimes. But it always resulted in a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1 in my favor, and that card just showed up.
What would say? So the card in question is Heavenly Dragon Circle. Tribute a worm and then add a worm from deck to hand, and if you tribute a non-effect, you get to special summon it. I believe is the text, and it also has a graveyard effect on the next turn because you can only activate 1 a turn to banish it to search a Tenyi card. How did this come up the most? What did you think was its most notable or frequent occurrence at being good?
So there's 2 things that came up specifically with it. The most common thing was normal summon a Moye or a Taya activate effect, and then your opponent would Imperm or Veiler. So you activate the Dragon Cycle, dodge it, search Shatana, the Water Tenyi, which is a level 4, which you can then special summon, and you still have the token from the effect, so you can just go into your 8 and continue playing as if they didn't use an Imperm or Veiler at all.
So because the effect resolves, you control a non-effect token, which Shatana doesn't care about. It can still special summon, and then you get a free 8.
Yeah. And then the other interaction that, when it came up, I just laughed. I special summoned an Ashuna against a Dragon Link player that had his board set up, and then he activates Heretic Spheres to bounce it, and the only other face-up card in the field at the time was his own Hot Red. So I Heavenly Dragon Circle, tribute my own Ashuna, and he had to bounce his own Hot Red with his spheres.
Didn't negate the circle?
He did, but I also had a Gamma, so
oh god,
he did not have a good time in that engagement.
And I guess that card also makes Gamma a lot better because the tribute is cost.
Getting it off the field, making sure there's no monsters on there, therefore Gamma becomes alive again.
If your opponent feels like ashing the circle, you just win the game on the spot, which is quite funny.
Yeah, it's that interaction, every time it came up, it was just a blowout. I believe every single game I drew the circle, I won. And that being, on the flip side, Gamma, the card that theoretically synergizes with it, was probably the worst card in the deck. It just clogged hands.
Yeah, looking at your deck, you were maining Gamma, Lancia, Ash, Siding, 2 Droll, and no other hand traps. So those were your choices, I guess. Do you explain? Do you want to explain why
the hand trap lineup?
Yeah, why you felt Imperm, Nib, Veiler weren't something that you wanted to play in this meta?
So Ash is definitely the card that was like 100% I'm going to run this, just because the amount of Fusion Destinies running around.
Yep.
It's the only clean out to that. As I said before, I don't like Nib and Tenyi Sword Soul because it turns off all your Tenyis. And then another option is maining Drolls, because Ash kind of conflicts with that idea of you stop a search or a summon from deck or whatever, so you don't really get the chance to Droll. You have to choose one or the other. So then it came down to the other options being Gamma and Lancia hit a lot of decks decently well enough, and the slight synergy between Gamma and Lancia, where if you open both of them, you get to keep your Gamma and Driver around, so you can start your turn with a Synchro 8 play, which is very strong in this deck.
Something like a Draco Berserker just to clear the board. Did that ever come up?
In during our hobby on Friday night it came up, but during the event I never drew them together.
Or your opponents just were maybe smart enough not to play into that exact combo.
I just never drew them. I resolved Gamma every time I drew it going second, but going first, it's a card that I side out every single time.
So obviously, we both had the same record, X3, after 8 rounds, so 5 wins, 3 losses. What do you think you would have changed then? Like, what cards would you sub in? If you say Gamma was the worst card in the deck, would you just drop the deck to 41 and play another 3 of, or would you try and pad it out with other cards you think would have helped?
Honestly, my biggest regret is probably not running a Fusion Destiny package.
Okay.
Those set of cards, just instead of the Gammas, would have been probably
Just for
incredibly
consistency?
good.
Like having something?
It gives you follow-up, and that's the one thing the deck is missing, because it lets you add back your Ecclesia, it lets you draw 2 cards. Gamma being the only card in your deck that really clogs in your hand after turn 1.
Whereas drawing a Fusion Destiny is kind of sick
Yeah.
in that instance as a replacement. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's also something I want to be looking at too. Like I noticed on the weekend, if someone cleared my board, I didn't have enough.
Like, you need 2 cards.
I had
to
lots
play
of
through.
2-1s over the weekend.
And obviously, Dino, you're not playing Desires, which is like pretty much the only top deck that can get you out of really bad situations in that instance where your board has been wiped. And without it, drawing a Tactics, drawing like a Vessel or a Moye, like they're all really average draws, I guess.
Yeah, well, like the other card is you've got the Circle in Graveyard, which gives you your follow-up as well.
That's true. Circle does give you any 10E card, as long as you control a non-effect monster, I believe, to activate it.
Yeah, so usually you can get to a Monk on your follow-up turn. Usually have like some random 10E in hand that you added off at Hara the previous turn, that if your board gets wiped, you can play through. The biggest problem I found over the weekend is the matches I lost were because the opponent broke my board and set up a DPE, and then I just could not kill them the following turn, and this deck just does not have the grind game to...
Yeah, DP is a real bastard there.
Yeah, Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer does present a really interesting, situation, because it is a constant resource starve with recursion. You're always going to be losing a card in the exchange, and they never do. Like, there's never a point in time where they are being starved out of the game in terms of their resources, because they consistently have their interruption returning.
Well, and the draw too, just being a cherry on top, where like they're resource starving you in a grind game, but also they get to just Pot of Greed for free. I think is what makes that card like above and beyond just broken. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, just moving on to the side deck, I'm actually curious, because obviously we see another super diverse side deck here. What would you say were the standout performers? Was there anything you wished you had sided? Anything that didn't show up for the event?
So in my side deck, the biggest standout card's probably Mystic Mine, and I had that in there specifically for the Mirror and the Brigade Mercuria matchups, because in testing with Lucas,
it was insanely good. Yeah,
you just bait out the spell Trap Negate and activate the Mystic Mine, and then you just OTK them through the Mystic Mine.
I think what was key in testing is that I wasn't putting in spell trap removal versus Sword Soul. It didn't seem particularly relevant. You were only going to set Blackout and maybe like a Droplets, which my deck can deal with. So when you would just slap down a Mystic Mine, it would remind me that you have to respect that basically in any deck. Yeah,
and then the anti-spells and order in the side deck are obviously for going first against Striker, which is the worst matchup for Sword Soul, as I learned.
There was a lot of Striker at this event.
Yeah, and they all scrubbed.
No, there was a Striker that got to top 4.
There was a Striker player that topped, and they were on the DPE package as well, of course.
Yeah, so do you want to just touch on that?
Me a lot.
Yeah.
That's the guy that beat you in.
Yeah, do you want to touch on that? Because obviously Striker, keeps falling in and out of the meta, but the introduction of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer has kind of again reinvigorated the strategy. So would you like to elaborate on how that deck performed against you?
Well, it wasn't much of a match. That was the only round I got 2-0'd in. So he just opened Veilers and Ashes in spades. Even with a Tactics. Game 1, he Veilered me, I Tactics, looked at his hand. He had another Veiler, Rota, Fusion Destiny, Widow Anchor. I'm just looking at this and like...
Just a gamer.
I just don't win this game. So I put back the Rota, pray doesn't get to Array, and just end on Baron Pass. And
he still gets DPE, yeah.
Then his top deck was Extravagance, not Extravagance. Prosperity, that's the one. And then he prospered into Array, and I'm just like, okay, cool, this is over.
We lost this one, yep.
And then game 2, I didn't see anti-spell, I didn't see order. I normal summon, he Veilers, and I passed turn because my hand was very bad. And then he, on his turn, he draws, activates Engage as his first card. I'm just like, I have to ash this. There's like no choice. And then afterwards, he activated Fusion Destiny, and in a simplified game state like that, he just beat me down with Enforcer.
So you didn't exactly experience Striker, you just got nut drawed twice, and there was nothing you could do about it. Unfortunate.
So, the theoretical like advantage of Strike having the matchup is like Widow Anchor's, like people are already taking in Chalice just for Sword Soul because it's really good. Like,
so why not make a searchable one
and resolve your effect? As well as the deck's not very good at dealing with follow-up, and Strike is a deck that has only follow-up.
Million follow-up, yeah.
As well as the fact if they Shark Cannon your Baron, they have a pop and negate, and they link it off, and they Shark Cannon again the next turn, they have a pop and negate, and that's also incredibly hard to deal with.
Yeah, I remember playing a lot of decks versus Striker, like Tri-Brigade. It came down to like just never hard make a Shoerake. Always summon it off an effect, because otherwise they just kill you with your own card.
I mean, this is something we even learned going backwards, just like playing against Dino when I first played Striker. You were just never properly making Kagaris because it was just our Kagaris and our Rays. And so in this kind of situation where Striker get the properly summoned Synchros, it's our Baron, our Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer.
Except that they... usually Striker just doesn't put you on a clock and you can wait a couple of turns. But if they draw Fusion Destiny, they win the following turn. So
and
really hard thing.
And that's the crazy thing, is that Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer fixes Striker's OTK problem.
Yeah, it also fixes their Kaiju problem.
Yeah.
You can just pop the Kaiju and then next turn pop the DP and your traps and spells alive again.
Well, I don't think I saw a single Kaiju this event. I don't think anyone was anticipating
interesting because during the event there were a ton of people on Small World. And post-event, I kind of just had like a realization of how easy it is to search Kaijus and things like Alpha, the Master of Beasts, off of Small World, and kind of wondering why I wasn't doing that in the main deck, just because Small World is such an average card going second a lot of the time.
So speaking of your list, why don't you touch on your list and your experience with this tournament? Obviously, during this moment, I was head judge for this event, so I was very much in a 13 hours of sitting at a screen and giving judge calls and speaking with incredible people across the globe. Notably, I think Rafizio, who was in New York, RJ, which was in Michigan, and I think Zed was on the Pacific coast. He was in Pacific Standard Time. But all in all, I had a really fun time, and obviously it was really interesting seeing everyone's different qualms and concerns. I will say I am sick of being a slave to technology, so that sucked. But apart from that, it was super interesting, and I had a great time. And I mean, judging is fun, and learning rulings is fun. And I'll ask a question at the end of the podcast and see if we can get some answers from people.
Oh, true. Yeah, it's a good one.
So here, why don't you touch on your list?
So
how your experience was.
I brought the other best deck of the format. Me and Dino sort of decided these were the two best, and we wanted to play something different this time. I brought Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk. A fairly standard build. I was playing the Small World package with 1 Dinotherium, and the ratio of Lyrilisks, which I think is the only thing people were tinkering with, was 3 Cobalt, 3 Turquoise, 3 Beryl, 2 Sapphire, and 1 Wagtail. I was really hot on 2 Sapphire. A lot of lists were on 1, but sometimes it's like this insane push for follow-up. If you don't burn through your Utopic Draco Future, it's your only way to make it going into like turn 4, because Warbler is like never on after turn 1, pretty much. And then notable tech cards, I was maining 2 DD Crow, 3 Imperm, and 3 Nibiru.
And how was your experience? So you also went 5-3. So what was your experience going through? What was some of the notable takeaways from
I mean, talk about slave to technology. I was robbed 1 win to a disconnect, unfortunately. It was a key moment. I was like, I drew the stones against, I think it was like Go Second Danger Orchest. I had like Warbler, Cobalt, Tri-Brigade follow-up, Imperm, Nibiru. I'm like, I'm absolutely winning this game. And I got halfway through the combo, and he kind of stops and goes like, "Oh, let me read recital." And then some dude joins the room, and my Discord just crashes immediately. So I lost the game 1, cleaned up game 2, and then game 3 we went to time, and he managed to just get enough damage on board to kill me. So it was really unfortunate. I lost that one. My other 2 losses, because I went X3, were one to the mirror against a guy who ended up going top 4 with the pretty much same deck. And then the other one was to Sword Soul, and this was unfortunately the only game I bricked. Every other game, I always drew some kind of combo, but it was game 3 against Sword Soul. I was going first. I drew Karass, Warbler, and no extenders, and I just lost, unfortunately.
And so in terms of your, showing, and obviously the testing that you did with Dino, and I believe Odyssey Joe as well, I believe you did some practice as well.
Yep, I did.
What was the reasoning for some includes? Obviously, we see your hand trap lineup is Nibiru Imperm with the 2 main decked Crow, as well as including the Small World. So what was the reasoning behind some of these includes?
Yeah, I tossed around hand traps like constantly. I felt that Impermanence and Nibiru were the 2 strongest cards in my deck, but before the tournament, I was also playing Gamma, like Dino. And in testing, it just sucked. No one was ever going to Ash like a bird call that was just done blind unless they were really stupid. And I felt like I didn't need to beat players who would make plays like that. I needed to beat players who were going to play around things like Gamma. And DD Crow is just a really strong card that also happens to sometimes be a combo extender. Dino actually talked me into playing Crow, and it never came up like it did in testing, but certainly there are several hands in this deck that are turned on by just the additional level 1 Winged Beast. I think I only added Crow once off of a recital against Drytron, but that game was like so won, it was not even close. Like, it was the 7th cherry on top of my 17 negate board with Harpy's Featherstorm set. Like, it did not matter in the slightest. I main decked 1 Cosmic for the reason we talked about. Don't want to have no outs to Mystic Mine. And I guess my side deck was pretty standard.
I mean, I would say it's probably not standard. There's a lot of back row removal. You have 2 Cosmics as well as the 3 Twin Twisters.
Oh, that's not true. I was not playing Twin. This list is wrong. I was on 3 Drolls, not 3 Twins.
Oh, okay, sure. So I'll just retract that statement. So the list was 2 Cosmic, 3 Droplets, 3 Drolls, 2 Lancia, and then we've got a Reboot, 3 Featherstorm, and an Imperial Order. I do believe, speaking with you after the tournament, you said that Droplets is the most valuable card at this moment in time.
Droplets is the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, and I'd love to know, do you two believe that that's the case? Like, Joe, I know that you weren't on it, but would you have won? Oh, you was on it? Yeah, sorry.
Main decked. Yeah, main deck Droplets for me. I just didn't want to lose to things like, and I wanted it to have that play going second. And I guess like the reason for it is like, I don't know. I feel like Sword Soul is definitely not one of those decks that, I mean, I might be wrong here, but like I found that I was 2-1 in everyone throughout the day. Like I would go first, win the game. They would go first, win, and then like I don't know why it was. I think I was better with the deck playing going first. A lot of people seem to have, thought that like the go second version is the better version, but they found out in the end that like people are now like sort of prepared for board breakers, and then if they have like a handful of board breakers and not enough follow up, it's just average, I suppose.
I think the going second build is really good in a field of Sword Soul. Yeah, they just don't have recovery, but so many decks have recovery.
Yeah. And Dino, how did Droplets perform for you throughout the event?
I don't think I ever drew it.
But in theory, how would it have performed for you?
In theory, in every like go second game that if I drew it, I probably would have won. Because all my 2 losses that weren't the striker plays was one of them I got winded out of the game, and he could not kill me for 4 turns. And I just could not find the winder out for 4 turns. And the other one was in the mirror, where I just could not break the full board because I didn't draw any hand traps, and I only drew engine, and I was 1 card short of breaking the board after going through a DPE, a Baron, a Dragite, a Chijao, and a Black. It was like 6 pieces of interaction. I was 1 card short of breaking it with my 6 cards.
Yeah.
This is maybe a hot take, but this format is good. It's also, I believe, a bit of a race. Whoever draws Droplet first wins. I legitimately think that about this format. The amount of games that I lost going second because my opponent set a Droplet going first, and it was just like the extra interruption that won them the game. And like drawing it going second, it's hard pressed for me to find a way you don't win that game. It's so strong.
Yeah, I won every game I drew my Droplet. So
Me too.
you're right there.
Every time. And combining it with cards like Small World or Bird Call, where
they're already designated for grave anyway,
you
so why
nullify
not?
the cost of Droplet. You get to negate an entire board, halve their attack for easy damage, and then just like OTK. I think I had notable wins against decks where I would like Droplet their board, leave one of their monsters on high attack, and then I make the double recital into assembled play and just OTK them with their own monster. Very funny. Yeah, Droplet is just way too good. It's almost good enough that it would be like semi-limit worthy, because it really does feel like if I draw Droplet and you don't, I'm just going to win the game.
Yeah, and I think very interestingly, just touching on this, obviously you cited the Dark Ruler, Joe, but I think the Droplets is just so much more impactful because all of the decks that you guys have profiled today can OTK. There's no point at which your decks can't do that, and that's what Droplets facilitates. Like, sure, the Dark Ruler is in there for maybe insurance policy, as a kind of security blanket, making sure that if it is too much and you need the additional backup, then that's what the Dark Ruler is for. But Droplets doesn't prevent you from killing them like Dark Ruler does.
No, and I think the part where Droplet gets absolutely ridiculous compared to something like Dark Ruler is how you could compare it to a card like Infinite Impermanence. When that came out, all of the pro players were nailing home, this is not just Veiler 2. This negates spell traps. This creates board presence just by being set. And Droplet is very similar. Watching decks use Droplet to avoid a negation like a Forbidden Chalice on a Artifact Scythe so that it still resolves. You could see players, playing around Oath with Droplet if they don't send
the trap.
Well, you can like Oath to try and negate something like Dark Ruler or Evenly Matched, and then you just Droplet send the card they're trying to negate, and it bypasses Oath because it has to target. Droplet just has so many outlets where it can get things off the board to make sure they resolve as well as getting value, negating your opponent's cards. It's just crazy.
And now to take a large sip of water and have a look at the print ratios for Brothers of Legend of Forbidden Droplets.
It sucks, because if you're not playing Droplet, you're not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it's really hard pressed to me to find a deck that doesn't want to play this card.
Yeah. And at least it's accessible now, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's an ulti print you can pull for free.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Just pull ulti's forehead.
All right.
So all in all, how would you two describe your event experience? And was there anything that you would have liked to, or would it say what was the biggest takeaway for you?
Topped.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's not a hard ask. But I guess starting with let's go, Joe. What was your biggest takeaway from your event that you attended, and potentially the one thing that you're going to apply going forward?
I was happy with the way I played. I don't think I misplayed much in Swiss at all, and like my top cut, like I didn't lose to a misplay, I just lost to a hand. So I always like those events where you can come away and be like, yep, I didn't make many mistakes. Like, there are things I could have probably done a little bit better. I definitely will start trying out some of those new techs. Like, I really want to have a go with that Heavenly Dragon circle. Like, listening to Dino there with the applications it has, like that they seem pretty insane to me. So that's something I'll definitely want to give a go. And also the Iris Sword Soul, I want to give that a wee go as well, just because like I'm not scared. I suppose I am. I'm kind of like scared about that invoked matchup, because like it's just rough if you don't have the outs, and like I guess if I want to main deck more things that have outs to those problem cards. I know that like it might hinder the deck against other decks, but
No, that's fair. I mean, Chalice is a good card. Like we said, it's great in the mirror. Deals with problem cards, and it's chainable at any point. You don't have to have a clear field. Even Droplet can be worse than Chalice if you're in a grind game. And you top deck it. It's just ass.
Yeah. And Dino, so what was your biggest takeaway from the event, and what would you apply going forward?
My biggest takeaway is this is like the first huge event I've played in a while, and it's definitely bring back the feelings of, man, I miss just playing round after round of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then realizing that
Mm-hmm.
even though I've practiced the deck for a really long time, as soon as like you go into the ring, you learn so much more about the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like every game's still a learning experience. Even the games I lost, I was like, oh, I could have won if I did something else. And just
Mm.
be constantly like learning and just like trying to improve yourself. Even if you're misplaying, like don't let it get you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, just looking at this format in general, like I really enjoy the format, apart from the situations that puts you in where it's you gotta have it or you lose. And
Mm.
that's where like the creative deck building comes in. What can I do so my deck is it, so I don't have to draw the droplet or I don't have to draw the anti-spell to win going first.
Would you
In
say those
those
situations are like
situations.
Protoss and Featherstorm, like cards that just if you don't have the out, you can't play, or is it more just unbreakable boards?
It's more just like certain decks just force you to have a certain card. So like against
Mm.
Shaddoll, you just need to have a Winder out, and like in my main deck, I just did not have a Winder out. Uh, and like the bird board, like going first, like that board's really hard to break. But if you like throw your Lancer and your Gamma at it, or like you Ash at a crucial time and they don't get the full board, like the board is very breakable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's certain cards just warp the format so incredibly greatly, such as Featherstorm, where like there's 4 cards in my side that are like the Mines and the Reboot that like I need all of these to be able to play through a storm.
Mm. Yeah. And Lucas, what was your biggest takeaway from this event, and what will you apply going forward?
This was my first like big event. I've played a couple in New Zealand. I guess if you count like Geek Culture Champs, which was around 80 people, similar kind of vibe. But that was so early in my Yu-Gi-Oh playing days that I don't think I took in as much as this. Plus, playing against people from all countries, I think was really enriching. I agree with Dino that I learnt a ton, not only from like playing it, but seeing other people play the deck. I think I learned a couple like just things that Bird Up can do that I didn't know, including the fact that Beryl Canary, for example, can reborn an Ensemble Robin, and then Wagtail can attach, giving you just an interrupt from nowhere. It's pretty sick. But mostly, I took away, I guess, a card assessment because I looked at the list afterwards, of course, and thought, oh, what could I have done to make this deck better? And I think the two things it was lacking was like good top decks. It was not great at, and I guess a resilience to interruption. A lot of the time, people just let Turquoise Cobalt resolve, and then you win the game. But there are key moments where you can interrupt, and I guess the thing I was lacking was that raw card advantage, something like Fusion Destiny, something like, in my opinion, Pot of Desires would have actually been really good in my list just to boost its consistency. Obviously, you play a lot of one-ups that you'd banish, but to be honest, it doesn't matter because half of a good board is way better than just saying pass turn and losing the game. So I think that was just a learning experience for me in such a long event about consistency and how often having a perfect optimal board really doesn't matter. I mean, looking at finals even, they neither of them really got to the full board ever. And it came down to just who had the better top decks, who had the better,
interruptions.
Who had the better interruptions, the one imperm that could change the fate of an entire match. I think, that all really informed my deck building.
Yeah. I guess to kind of finally, before moving on to our next section of discussion, is there any card this format that is worth banning? Is there anything that at this moment in time in the format has currently emerged as a problematic card or something that needs to be, adjusted? I keep doing these like
teasing the fans.
Painful choice teasers. But I guess, Joe, from your experience, is there anything this format that's truly bannable?
I still think IO just needs to go because it's just like I don't like when you're observing a door. It's like going backwards and forwards, and one person's just like, "Oh yeah, I have IO now. I win." Or like even at the start of a game, they just flip IO at the start. They don't have the outs game. Like I don't like cards like that. And that needs. We've spoken at length about IO needing to go, and I still believe it does.
Dino, do you think that anything at this moment in time in this format is worth banning?
Funnily enough, I don't think anyone's going to like have the same take, but I think the biggest problem card right now in the format is Celestial of all the cards. Just because it gives you the draw 2 on top of your Phoenix Enforcer. I think if Celestial's
Okay.
gone, that would be a lot less oppressive. It would be they suddenly wouldn't have a 5-card hand on turn 4 or turn 3, and then you wouldn't have to work as hard to win these low resource game states.
Because they're not going to ban DPE, obviously.
No.
Not for a bit, no.
It's too early. Also, it'll probably never get banned. It doesn't have the kind of text on it that necessitates a ban, like VFD or as a thought, and all the cards that literally just say, nah.
You can't play. Yeah. And Lucas, do you think anything is worth banning at this moment in time as the format is emerging?
I've spoken my piece on Droplet. I don't think they should ban it yet because I think it currently answers, as Dino said, a lot of the must-have-it boards quite cleanly. And it's an adaptable out to, either like a Winder or an Unbreakable combo board that necessitates that you offer more tributes to it, right? Like, to break the full bird up board, you need to send 4 cards. To beat Winder, you only need to send 1. So I like it. It's balanced around that, but it does feel like it's warping the format. And I don't think there's a lot of counterplay to it. You can set your oath up. You can, flip anti-spell and make them use it in standby so they can't use it as efficiently. But for the most part, it's just this unanswerable thing that goes, oh, you got droplets? Cool, I lost. It doesn't feel great. Especially when Sword Soul's so capable of then going, oh yeah, normal Moye, full combo, OTK, nice game. It's where Dark Rule is like a lot more balanced.
Because you just don't lose that turn.
Yeah, it feels a lot more like Soul Charge, where like you're like, oh, you had Dark Ruler, but at least I have a chance. I'm not dead. Maybe a hand trap in my hand will save me, or a Nibiru well timed can save me from this one.
Personally, I am not really looking at anything that should be banned at this moment in time. I think the format is quite diverse. I think if we see the greater inclusion of things like Harpy's Featherstorm or Archnemesis Protoss, then I might start kind of make a cause for concern. However, at this moment in time, I think the format's super diverse. It's super unique and allows for a lot of variety in the game and deck building. I mean, the finals of this event was a Bird Up versus Tri-Zoo. Like, that's what was taking the finals there.
Two flavors of Tri-Brigade.
Two flavors of Tri-Brigade. And that's the thing. But you still see the power of Zodiac is still emerging even after Dryden is gone, even after Barrage is gone.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Yeah. How many times should we just not print an XYZ that lets you attack directly?
Let's ban Tiger Mortar next time. Like, just keep robbing them of Zeus activations.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I think at this moment in time, I think there's nothing too crazy.
No.
What might get crazy is our next section, and that is our discussion on the latest reveals and our future deck designs for the Alba's Strike structure deck that is slated to be releasing in March next year in the TCG. This deck, I believe, is only just released in Japan or is about to. We have an entire deck list available to us, courtesy of the OCG. This is an indicative of what we're expecting to be receiving in the TCG. However, there are some pretty cool cards, one of which is probably one of the best fusion spells they've ever printed.
Well, let's get around to it. I want to go through every card.
Sure.
There's only a few new cards that, most of them we won't talk about for too long because they're not that insane.
No.
But it's kind of nice just to go through a new deck like this that is going to be meta and explain why these cards are insane.
Yeah. So I guess starting off, we have the Brigade Mercuria. This is a level 4. I mean, it's funny. I just total preface this section, by the way. They've supported every single Alba's Ecclesia storyline archetype going forward. So you have the introduction of Brigade Mercuria, which is a kind of targeting protection design. I don't think I need to read the description.
When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albas, quick effect. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, negate it. So it negates any monster effect if you control an Albas. It's a hand trap. Kind of reminds me of the, I'm blanking, Subterra Fiendus.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not an Omni. And then if it's banished, you can add a Fallen of Albas or a monster that lists it from deck to hand. So good card, really strong.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how it fits into Tri-Brigades, but I could see it showing up in decks that play the Albas fusions.
To be honest, this seems like a good small world target. It's a dark level 4 winged beast. That seems like a good bridge, actually.
That's kind of true.
Yeah.
Moving on to Springen's Kit. This is another new archetypal support card that happens to work with the deck. If you have a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albers as material on your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. So the freest summon of all time. It's a level 4 Dark Beast. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one of your branded spell traps that is banished in your deck or graveyard to your hand, and then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. So just from anywhere, on normal or special, and it can be summoned at pretty much any time in the game because this deck seems to just turbo out the Fallen of Albers fusions as fast as possible. Then we have the Unlikely Sword Soul Allies, which is a level 4 light spellcaster tuner. It says when a monster declares an attack, you can special this card from your hand. If you do, negate that attack. Then, if you control a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albers as material, you can destroy the monster that declared an attack. And then full stop. If a monster is banished face up, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your field or graveyard, special summon one light spellcaster monster whose attack equals its own defense from your hand or graveyard.
This is obviously designed to combo with Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous.
Yep. Probably the most mid of the cards announced. I don't know if Sword Soul decks have been teching this in the OCG.
It's not out yet, so we wouldn't know.
Oh, we don't know.
No.
But attack negation is not. It hasn't been relevant for a really long time.
Warrocks. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a really good counter
Do you
to
have a TCG
Warrocks.
exclusive in your mouth, or is that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And then the pretty cracked cards, things, mainly the spell traps, I'd say.
Definitely.
We have Paradise Branded, a continuous spell with a really familiar first line of text. The activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. The activation. Also, your opponent can activate cards or effects when a monster is fusion summoned this way. This is just Magical Meltdown. I believe Magical Meltdown doesn't also include effects.
Yes, it does.
It does. This is just Magical Meltdown. And then if you fusion summon a fusion monster, except during the damage step, you can add a Fallen of Albers or monster that lists that card in its text from your deck to your hand.
So this is quite fascinating. I feel like this is the first really point of discussion because really this does just read as Meltdown. But I mean, we've discussed it. Branded / Despia / the Albers deck have a fusion field spell. So this is just kind of designed to combo with it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you can't play Meltdown? Here you go. Here's Meltdown.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah. And obviously not giving you the immediate +1, but you are gaining resources for actions that you would already be doing.
Now, Dino and I have both kind of worked on some sample lists for the deck, but Dino, you want to give your initial thoughts on this card? How you feel about it? Is Dino with us?
Sorry, I pushed talk. The biggest downside of this card, from what I see, is the fact that there are so much better cards to search. And if you're not searching this card, do you really want to run it? Because it inherently does nothing for your deck. It's not like a Meltdown where activating it gets you your whole engine. Activating this card does practically nothing. It doesn't even protect your spells from like an Ash, which is just a unique
Is the
way
most
of
likely
negating
thing
an
people are
effect.
going to do.
Yeah, which would be broken.
I mean, Meltdown had the unique viability because Invocation can be hit by Ghost Bell, which negates activations. This doesn't really protect your spells in the same way. I don't know. Can the fusion monsters in this deck that fusion summon be belled?
Yes,
Yes.
they banish from grave.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those can be
Or they
belled. So I guess
jump
this
back.
protects those if people start to play Bell again. It could come up, I guess.
Or like it protects them just because your opponent cannot respond
Yeah.
to their summon and their fusion on summon.
Exactly. So you get that kind of synergy.
Yeah.
Then I think really the card to be discussing here is a lovely normal spell that's called Branded Fusion. It's pretty easy to understand. It simply says fusion summon one fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albers as material from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. You can only activate 1 branded fusion per turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck the turn you activate this card, except fusion monsters. Never in my life did I think we would see a better Shadow fusion.
And this is the
but
reason you're not
here
searching.
we are.
This is the reason you're not searching Paradise Branded. This is 99% of the time the card you're going to want to get.
Yes, this is crazy. Joe, as our resident, I've already said the word, unfortunately. However, as our resident
We talked about it
S
enough.
word expert, what are your thoughts and feelings on a power crept fusion spell.
It's nuts. Like, imagine a searchable Shaddoll fusion. Like that's what you really need to say. And even one that like allows you to do more. Like that. It's crazy. There's not really much I can say about it. It's just broken.
The crack things about this card twofold. One, no activation requirement on this card. Just do it. The locking into fusion monsters is a restriction. It is not nothing, but it is not a massive restriction. It doesn't lock you out of special summoning in general, just extra deck. So as long as your deck is built around it, I don't think this card has a downside. And the other thing is that Shaddoll Fusion was always limited by the fact, limited. Listen to me talking about Shaddoll Fusion like it's a limited card, but you can only summon Shaddoll monsters, right? This card offers maybe a little bit more versatility because the suite of Fallen of Alba's monsters tends to lend itself to be a lot more generic, and I guess knowing the other cards that exist in the branded Despia archetype can just fusion summon generic monsters too. Albion, the branded dragon, I believe, just has an effect that says fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster by banishing from grave or hand or field, and that is not locked into a monster that lists Fallen of Alba's. So we've already seen decks using this card to make Dragoon. You can make Ojama Knight. You can make Last Warrior from another planet. Like, this card probably will see the most play in this deck, but is just so broken outside of it as well.
Yeah, we're complaining about Fusion Destiny currently and how Destroy Phoenix Force is so oppressive. This is exactly the same thing, except it gets them gets the deck whatever they want, and then you can activate Fusion Destiny afterwards anyway.
Yeah, this can summon DPE too if you open one of the pieces. Hilariously.
Yeah. So I think this is probably the most notable piece of support that's been released. Obviously, branded spell means that it's settable off cards, and it synergizes incredibly well with the deck and what it aims to do. So thanks Konami for not putting this as a short printed card in a set that's coming out, because we're just going to be getting the structure deck, so it's super accessible.
Yeah, we're so used to being screwed.
Yeah.
Lastly, we'll talk about the trap cards. There are some really good trap cards. Again, I think they fall victim to but why would you search these when you could play Branded Fusion? But we have Branded Blade. Banish any number of branded spell traps in your graveyard. Special summon that many Ice Blade tokens that are level 8 Dark Dragons with 2,500 attack and 2,000 defense. So big chonkers. Then you can banish it from your graveyard, target a banished Fallen of Albas or any monster that specifically lists them, add it to your hand. You can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. So can't use both effects in one turn, but honestly, making a bunch of 2,500 attack point monsters is not nothing.
No.
And the recursion effect is quite nice. So definitely more playable than the other branded traps that have been released. You have Branded Condemnation, the
Infinity Barrier,
the de facto mandatory counter trap that negates everything if you control X of an archetype. When a spell trap card or monster effect is activated that includes effect to special summon a monster, return a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albas as material to the extra deck. 1 from your face-up field or 2 from your graveyard. Really weird requirement. And if you do, negate the activation and destroy that card. So sort of half of a Solemn Warning, I guess.
And then
you can banish
half of an Infinity Barrier.
Well, it only negates
trap.
things. Well, it only negates things that special summon a monster. So it's the part of Solemn Warning that negates summon effects.
And then it's the part of Infinity Barrier that can negate Spell Trap.
No, it
only
has
negates
to
spell
summon a
traps.
monster.
Yeah, this only negates like fusion spells. It's not that good.
Okay.
If this negated generic spell traps, you would definitely play it. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard, target a branded spell trap in your graveyard, except this one, add it to your hand. So all of the traps have recursion, which is nice. And again, you can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. And then there are 2 new fusion monsters. They are both absolutely insane. Lubellion the Searing Dragon. It is a level 8 light dragon fusion. Requires 1 dark monster and 1 Fallen of Albas. Can't think of any good dark monsters I'd want to foolish with Branded Fusion, can you?
No, not a single one.
If this card is fusion summoned, you can discard 1 card. Fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except this card, by shuffling fusion materials listed on it into the deck from among cards on the field, in your graveyard, and or your face-up banished cards. For the rest of the turn, this card can't attack.
Oh,
also, you
no.
cannot special summon. No, God. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, except fusion monsters. You can only use this effect of Lubellion, the Searing Dragon, once per turn. This card's cracked.
What a moment.
Not only does this discard as effect, which means
it's cost.
Oh, it's cost. Okay, but the discard is definitely a cost. But shuffling back banish cards to fusion summon is obviously cracked. Dino, do you want to talk to us about some of the implications of this card, what it's capable of?
I mean, obviously, it makes the grind game of this deck insane because realistically, you'll have a resource loop between Lubellion and Albion that you're going to banish your material, then you gotta shuffle them back, and then you're gonna branded fusion them back into your graveyard, and you're gonna rinse and repeat that cycle.
Yep.
So you're realistically doing the same thing every single turn of the game, which is summoning a bunch of 2,500 or bigger fusion monsters. The restrictions of this card do not matter at all.
No.
The fact that it's light is actually really relevant because it gives it a line where branded fusion ends up summoning a construct and getting you a schism by itself.
Whoa, I did not know that. Was it send Squamata, dump Schism, then use Lubellion to summon
to shuffle
construct?
back the Squamata, and it can't shuffle back itself, right? But you can use any other light monster.
Yeah.
So wait, what do you do?
Well,
Sorry, do you want to run us through the line? Or we'll talk about that when we get to your sample deck list, I guess.
So pretty much, you branded fusion, dump Squamata Albaz, chainlink 1 Lubellion, chainlink 2 Squamata, dump your Schism, fusion summon Construct, shuffling back Lubellion itself and the Squamata to summon Construct, and then Construct can dump Shaddoll Core, adding back the Shaddoll Schism to your hand, and then that's your Schism.
Yeah,
or
okay,
if
I
you've
can
got
see
any
that.
other way of fusion summoning, you can just fusion summon the Construct away for like an Albaz, a Despia monster to get into the graveyard that way. Or if you just open the core, you can just discard the core for Lubellion effect, and then you just dump a beast instead and draw a card or something of that description. So it's just a one card that gives you a schism, and it's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. It just feels like this is exactly what the deck was missing, which is again a sentence I feel like we really say for Konami providing support to archetypes. Like, this is exactly what this deck is missing. All the support, the incredible spell and trap lineup, and then the new extra deck monsters. Truly it is like they are just the final pieces in the Albaz branded fusion puzzle.
Yeah. It makes Alba's really good as well, because now you have a guy you can super poly your opponent's monsters into that then can immediately summon another card with no cost.
Yeah, and then can immediately keep going. There's so much. And then I think obviously finally here we have the boss monster for the kind of the fusions.
And oh my god, is it a boss monster?
It is a boss monster. So this is Mirajay the Iceblade Dragon. So this is a dark worm.
It's a worm.
Which is cool.
It's a worm. Why?
Level 8 dragon, or level 8 fusion that requires Fallen of Albaz and then a fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monster. You can only control one, and then once per turn, quick effect, you can send one fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz's material from your extra deck to grave as cost to banish a monster on the field, non-targeting, but that particular effect cannot be used again next turn.
Next turn.
Oh no.
Oh no. And then if this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field by your opponent, you can activate this effect, destroy all monsters your opponent controls during the end phase of this turn. So
continuing the theme of restrictions that just don't matter.
Yeah, there is no downside to this. So if you can float your Mirror Jades into other Mirror Jades, the sending effect is not once per turn.
Yeah, you can. You can only control one. So can you fuse this into another copy? Or
I mean, it's a fusion monster, so as long as you've got a Fallen of Albaz, that's fine.
Is that how that works? It's not like Tikaboo where you can't attempt to summon it if you already have one.
I don't think you'd be able to summon another one using.
Yeah, you can't link Appaloosa into Appaloosa, right? That's not how that card works.
Yeah, that's fine.
Doesn't matter. That restrictions are a huge deal.
Yeah, so this card does so much. The Foolishing from Extra Deck to Grave facilitates so many of the Albaz fusions that say if this card was sent to grave this turn, think so it's like Titaniclad to search Dogmatica cards, is Sprint to whatever,
Sprint
everything.
adds a spring in card.
Sprint adds a spring in. Brigand adds a Tri-Brigade.
Yep. Albion sets a branded spell trap from deck, so it just gives you a
branded fusion
follow-up.
Yeah, so there's just so much that this card facilitates. And then the board nuke is just the cherry on top of this one, because it disincentivizes it getting rid of, and it just has to leave the field.
Not to mention all of the Despia cards float when their fusion monsters are killed. So you kill this, Alaba resummons, searches, and then
No, negates,
No, it
because
doesn't
you can
actually
use one
negates.
Alaba effect.
oh sorry, Alaba comes back, negates. Then you can like brand it in red, fusion summon another thing maybe, and then in the end phase, because you sent Titanic Clad, you can special out Albas and fusion with you. It's like this guy's just the biggest asshole to deal with ever printed, I think.
There's also one more thing with this card that I feel like a lot of people got miss is because it's a level 8 worm fusion monster with 2500 defense, you can brand it in high spirits any 10-year Sword Soul monster to search Ecclesia, and then you can summon Ecclesia effect and get it back in the end phase.
That's kind of sick.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's kind of sick. What the hell?
This is kind of what we've seen, like the support is truly providing. Like we have seen since Rise of the Duelist, the Albas cards, and then all the fusions that have come out in subsequent sets. And then, we saw the introduction of like Enlightening Overdrive, Albion, and the branded spells. These were kind of cards that we were, it started to kind of form itself together as a deck. Dawn of Majesty introduced the Despia stuff, which gave us Alaba. So you're kind of seeing that branded is now becoming an archetype. Burst of Destiny, you've seen the introduction of more fusion things. There's even more like Sword Soul, Ice Jade, or Ice Jade stuff coming in, Battle of Chaos.
We're probably getting more support for this deck. Like,
yeah,
that's what's crazy about it.
It's so crazy to think that this is basically been like 2 years in the making for Konami. It's taken 2 years for them to take a single secret rare from Rise of the Duelist and flesh out the entire archetype, and I think they've done it really well.
It's cool seeing it because at first it seemed so like the Dear Servant could search it, but then it locked you out of the extra deck, so it was useless the turn you searched it, and you're like, what's the point of this crap card? And then over time, it slowly started to piece together a strategy, and then this deck is like an explosion.
Yeah.
So we've made 2 sample deck lists. I think we won't go over them in depth because we're probably getting quite long in the pod. But we can chuck them up on screen for any of the video listeners. And I guess, Dino, if you want to walk through the theory of the list you've made really quick and give people a heads up of how you think the deck is going to look when this comes out.
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind the list I did was pretty much this is kind of what I expect to see in the OCG, which is have all those super broken engines, slap them into one deck. So you've got the Dogmatica package with the Nidia Servants, the Maximus, the Ecclesia, that's all very standard. That by itself will get you Schism if you wanted. Then you have the Despia package, which is branded openings, branded whites, branded reds, that gets you to your branded fusions, and is just a generic engine that's really good for advantage, as well as like the super poly target of choice of the format is definitely going to be the big level 10 Despia monster or level 11 Despia monster.
Yeah, Proskinium.
Then obviously Fusion Destiny, it's free in this deck, locks you into fusions. Who cares? You just activate it fast. And then Ash Blossom as the only hand trap you probably need, because every single one of your spells your opponent has to negate or they lose the game.
Pretty much. Branded Fusion, Fusion Destiny,
so
and
you
Dear
don't
Servant.
really need anything else. And then in the mirror, you can just negate their branded fusion or their Nadir Servant or something like that. And hopefully your big monsters being on field first wins you the game.
Yeah.
I think the only thing holding this back in the OCG is I believe Nadir Servant is limited there.
Yes.
So they probably won't be on the same exact package. I'm sure they'll be on some other brand of engine. Brand, yeah.
They have Max C, so...
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've actually seen some OCG lists that are just incredulously designed. They are so smooth. And I mean, this is kind of the cross-out deck in the OCG because you truly don't care about any other hand trap.
Yeah, just Ash. Or just Ash and Max C, and it's like, cool, everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so do you want to break through or go down your kind of theory with the deck?
So I went for a much more pure build than Dino. I didn't put in any of the Dogmatica stuff. I felt like I'd much rather have my engines not necessarily conflict. Of course, you don't want to have to start with Nadir Servant, so if you don't draw into like the branded fusion or the Alaba, you'd be a little bit more stuck. Obviously, Schism alone can win you some games. But I just maxed out on getting to Alaba. You know, I've got Foolish Burial in there, I've got 3 Prosperity, and then I'm just playing 3 Super Poly, 3 Droplet, 3 Fusion Destiny, 3 Imperm, 3 Nib, 3 Ash. Screw it. Like, I'm going to resolve Branded Fusion. I'm going to get 2 interruptions off of that 1 card, and I'm just going to sit pretty with 4 cards in my hand and hope for the best.
With the floating effects of things like Dramaturge and Alaba to provide more interruption.
Well, Alaba, Dramaturge, Float. If you ever used Tragedy, you just get a recursion. Ecclesia floats. Albers is always shuffled back into the deck off of Lubellion, which like honestly feels like the choke point of the deck, is you want to like make sure your opponent just doesn't get Albers back in the deck, maybe if they're on 1. But I guess it's a reason to run 2. As
that's
probably
the answer. If you're striker, you shot cannon the opponent's Albers.
Yeah, and then you maybe win the game. So
and then you just make your own Ice Jade, and you win the game.
That's true.
Yeah, I'd like to fusion with your things.
It is funny if you ever leave full of Albers on the field, you just get super polyed. Your opponent makes an ice, like an ice dragon, and you just get owned. It's quite funny.
The mirror match is going to be horrible.
Suck ass. Just proskenning on each other constantly.
Super poly. Just
reminds me of like that triple super poly Shadow format. That's what it's going to be like. Yeah.
Horrible. And we'll all be playing this deck. It's going to be accessible. The staples honestly aren't that expensive. Like Alaba is probably the only necessary. I guess if you want to play Ecclesia, that's somewhat money as well. But
yeah, this is the fun fact of the day. I don't know how many people of you are aware of this. Ecclesia's add back from grave for fusion was sent there as mandatory. You must add it back from grave to hand. It is not an optional effect.
So funny.
Which is hilarious. I don't know why they tagged that. They didn't put an if in front of it, but so you just have to add it back. Oh no, I guess I get my free special summon every turn. Crazy.
And I've seen Dino play Despia now. It's so annoying to beat that deck. It's definitely doable, but everything floats, everything returns. I can see, Dino, you're on like the field spell, which provides floating effects. You're playing more branded fusion spells because obviously Albion and other cards can reset them. Yeah, it's pretty sick. This deck's going to be crazy. I'm going to say it's the best deck of the next format. I think Branded Fusion is going to define 2022 Yu-Gi-Oh! In a way that we haven't seen in a while.
I think the only thing I'm missing, and that I completely missed, is I did not realize that Spriggan's kit just searched the Branded spell trap, so that just searches Branded Fusion.
My list, I think, is not on it, but it should be. I was playing 1, and I think I took it out. I
feel like that would be a 3 of, and then you could also do some cool things, like if you're foolishing, or if you summon the Brigand from extra deck and then send it to grave, end phase, summon kit effect, search Brandon Red, just make another fusion monster. You can just do that all in your end phase.
That's true.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I think that this deck is truly going to be it, and I think we'll be interested to see how it's impacted by the January ban list that we are expecting. Obviously, Ruben with the painful choice teasers, but that is a list, that is a ban list that we are expecting to see. And in terms of OCG representation, the OCG players are clamoring for the banning of the engines. So seeing the removal of things like the adventurer tokens that we're expecting to see in January, the Fusion Destiny package that we're seeing everywhere in Japan. So obviously the Grand Creators in which that adventurer token engine comes out is on the cusp of the ban list. So I'll be interested to see how much this new strategy has to contend with, decks that can just access and Omni negate if they don't need normal summon effects. Honestly, you can kind of get there with this one. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, but that's okay.
This card just summons Dragoon, by the way, like for free.
If you're really bored and don't want to do any thinking, this can just be a Branded Fusion can just be a 1-card Dragoon.
You send Albers and Hex Light Sealed Fusion, and then you use those to make Dragoon. Awesome, great game.
Big brain. If you want to use your Starlights for anything, this is probably your best bet. You don't need to play Red Eyes Fusion. You can just summon it off of Lubellion. Albion, apologies.
You can play Starlight Ecclesia, Starlight
Dragoon if you're really bored. But that's fine. So so we've had a really good recap of things past, present, and obviously coming the future. I guess, are there any final thoughts from anyone as we come to a close? Joe, anything you're looking at discussing or looking forward to?
I guess the listeners out there, just get your Alubas fast or Alubas fast. Like, they're gonna keep going up. Like, get them.
Sorry, Del, they've already spiked.
They're spiking now, but I mean, they're gonna keep going up. Like,
not a financial advice podcast, by the way.
Oh, I know. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I think the Painful Choice podcast is going to be a huge one coming up soon. It's going to be a really interesting time for Yu-Gi-Oh soon. So yeah.
Amazing. Dino, anything you're looking forward to, release-wise, event-wise?
I'm just waiting on Ghosts to be able to play my agents. Sad that wasn't a structure deck, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, we'll just be drinking that pickle juice that is Konami. They can't all give us Alba's Strike structure decks for all the OCG created ones, but that'll be a fun set to open. Ghost Rares are always cool, and I feel like that's going to be really fun to review as more things get announced. Lucas, anything you're looking forward to? Product releases, events?
I'm looking forward to this deck. I think it's going to be fun. I am politely waiting for Brothers of Legend. It was slightly delayed in New Zealand because I really want to play Utopia. That deck looks fun as hell, and kind of worthy of some jank hobbies because it is kind of a 3-card engine deck that relies on your opponent not drawing Nibiru, but those are like my favorite decks. So
play cross out. Yeah. That's all I got to say.
That's true. And Ruben, anything you're excited about? You've been judging a lot, so obviously you haven't been playing this format as much.
Yeah, and only God can judge me. So I think anything I'm looking forward to, obviously I think Brothers of Legend, super excited for Grand Creators. I think I probably talked about it last week, but I'm still super excited for Inzectors.
Exorcisters, you were pretty hot on too.
Exorcisters and Inzectors, a lot of eggs. A lot of ins and eggs. But yeah, definitely looking forward to Inzectors. I have begrudgingly purchased my 3 Hornets from an overseas retailer. So I will be the proud owner of 3 Order of Chaos Super First Edition Hornets.
Disappointed in every Face Downs fan, by the way, for not selling us Inzector Hornets in New Zealand.
Devastated.
How dare you?
Yeah. However, I have made do. So I look forward to the support that it comes forward to, and hopefully this is an insect deck that is can hold its own. Unfortunately, not among the likes of the Bee Troopers.
5th time's the charm, right, gang?
Yeah. And any questions? Anything that we've received or
no?
No. Okay. Well, so please keep on writing in.
We'll do another mailbag episode soon. I think people are dying to ask us questions.
Yeah, and I think kind of just wrapping this up, we've just started our own Discord server. To those of you who are listening, we'll be sure to make it available. But I believe it is just the at the Face Downs on Discord.
Some sequence of numbers and letters. Yeah. Discord channels are weird.
They're strange.
We'll post it with the episode so people can find it. It'll be in the description of the YouTube video.
Yep. Obviously, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please feel free to give us a like, comment, and subscribe. We love reading your questions, and we hope that you guys are enjoying this content. And please subscribe because we will be posting the results of the Battle of the Islands. I believe this podcast will probably
be come out after
the fact. However, so please go check out the Battle of the Islands video that we will be releasing. The 2 titans of the North and South Island just duked it out, and we can't wait to show you these results. And then finally, obviously, give us a follow on your preferred podcasting app. Anything is appreciated. And please feel free to contact us at thefacedowns@gmail.com. That's thefacedowns@gmail.com.
You got there.
For any comments, questions, concerns, or queries, or ruling questions, because I have been doing a lot of that this past 2 weeks, and I can say I've been enjoying it.
Talk about learning. Ruben's probably been put through like the guerrilla boot camp of judging, because Ruben signed up like, I'll head judge this 150-person international remote duel event. What could possibly go wrong?
Technology.
Everything.
Yeah, that's all I can blame. Oh, and I guess I'll answer this question next episode. I'll give an answer to this question. However, I'll give everyone one last thing to mull over and present an answer. If you'd like to email us the answer.
Email in the right answer, we'll give you a lollipop.
Yeah. Coronavirus.
You're not allowed to look it up, though.
You can't look it up. So my question to all listeners and to all people who enjoy, it is a very simple question with a very complex board state. So I will simply say that player 1 or player A controls a Mech Knight Avram in attack position equipped with a double-edged sword. Player B controls a Mystery Shell Dragon in defense mode with 0 defense. And it has 2 equipped spells, Rod of the Mind's Eye and Big Bang Shot, which are both equipped to player A's Avram. So the current stats on the field is that Mech Knight Avram is 4,400 attack, and the Mystery Shell Dragon is in defense mode. How much battle damage would each player take if player A's Avram at 4,400 attack player B's Mystery Shell Dragon with 0 defense?
So for clarification, Mech Knight Avram is equipped with double-edged sword, Rod of Mind's Eye, and Big Bang Shot, attacking into a 0 defense Mystery Shell Dragon.
So feel free to send us your answers, and we'll give you the answer to this question next week's episode.
This could be a segment. This is like Judge Ruben's bullshit jank rulings question corner. I love it.
Anyway, check this out. Anyway, thank you so much to everyone who has listened. As always, I'm Ruben.
I'm Lucas.
And I'm Joe.
And
I'm Dino.
Yeah, he did it.
Yes, he did it.
He listens to the podcast. Let's go.
Sir. And you have been listening to the Face Downs.
Oh, he did it as well.
We got the synchronized
Oh
too.
my God.
Oh man, I haven't done that yet.
Such-
Oh.